Okay, I want to give you guys that are out there cutting a good idea of some helpful hints, things that I do that help me to achieve better looking, successful lawns whenever we have conditions that are wet. And what do I mean by wet conditions? I mean, I'm not talking about necessarily in the morning time when the dew is on the grass. I'm saying if it rained overnight and in the morning time when it's time for you to take off and go, and the ground is saturated. It's not raining, but the ground could be wet. And basically, when that ground is wet, it presents a whole different set of issues for you out there cutting grass. The first issue that I want to talk about is the issue of grass clumping underneath your lawnmower. Some mowers clump worse than others. Some go a longer period of time before they'll blow out a clump. But when the conditions are wet enough, most machines will have that issue. I've run a lot of different types of machines. Not every machine that there's made, but I've run a lot of them, and most of them will have the clumping issue. And basically what happens when you're cutting and the conditions are wet, like I described, the grass cakes up underneath the bottom of the deck on the mower because it's wet and it sticks. And it just keeps building up and building up and building up. And when it gets completely to the point where it either touches a blade or falls off, the blades will kick it out in a big clump. And I call that clumping. The cure for clumping is to go back over the clumps of grass that you've cut, raise your deck up about an inch over the height that you cut. What you want to do is, if you're, let's say this is the bottom of your deck, and this is the blade. If the blade is touching the ground, it's getting everything, and it's going to clump up on you again if you go over it again with the blade all the way to the ground. If you take the blade up about an inch over that, it's only going to skim what's between. It's not going to get it all. It's going to get a little bit of it, or half of it, or 3/4 of it, but it ain't going to get it all. The higher you raise it up, the less it's going to get. And what you have to figure out is you have to figure out the adjustment that you need to take on your particular machine to blow the clumps out. And I don't know, it varies from machine to machine. Like I have a X-Mark, and it blows out a big wide spread whenever it blows out the full width of the deck of the opening chute on the right hand side of the deck. Gravely machine, it's got the same width of a deck, but grass clippings come out in about that small of a space. So they come out in the very front and shoot in a straight line. So it's different with every machine. And so what you have to do is figure out the level that you need to adjust your machine at to go over the clumps and make them break up. And what happens is the blades hit them and they kind of scatter them out a little bit. When you go over the clumps, you may have to go over certain areas a couple or 2 or 3 times to get it to look really good. So, because what happens is, while you're growing over the clumps, your machine is still building clumps under it. So you're creating clumps as you're getting rid of clumps. So it can be a real pain in the butt. But if you've got plenty of work to do, what you have to do is just figure out what happens with your particular machine, how it blows it out, and what you need to do to get your lawns nice and smooth, and because the big lumps and clumps of grass really are not appealing at all. Hopefully this helps somebody. And the wet conditions are not something that anybody wants to work in, but unfortunately, you know, if it rains 2 or 3 days in a row and you get way behind, you have to sometimes. And if you're one of these big outfits that, you know, has got to do so many per day just to keep up with the flow, then you have to. And there's a big difference between mowing completely saturated wet grass and mowing just grass with a little bit of dew on it. The little bit of dew it'll blow out usually, and have a minimum amount of clumping. But the wet grass is what I'm talking about. And one of the things you have to be critical or really careful on is borders, where you're blowing grass away from borders. Sometimes you want to go, depends on how far your machine will spray grass. I've seen machines that'll spray at least 15 feet. So you have to, if you got a 5-foot machine, you got to go 3 sweeps to the inside to blow grass away from a building or away from a parking lot, away from a flower bed, something like that. But then you're going to turn around on that 4th sweep and sweep it and send it back. Well, you have 3 cuts of really thick clippings that you're going to have to go and spray back out. So the ones of you who cut a lot know what I'm talking about. But you may have to go over that couple, 2 or 3 different times to get it smooth. So when you get done, in my opinion, when you get done with the lawn working on it, you want it to look nice and uniform and smooth with all the clippings sprayed out evenly. You don't want big lumps and clumps in any certain places. You want to go back through and spray those out. And for those of you who vacuum, I'm not really talking to you. I'm talking about the big open area places where we cut and leave the clippings on the ground. And hopefully this is helpful. I know most manufacturers, in the book it says don't cut when the conditions are wet. Now I'm not telling anybody to cut when the conditions are wet. You cut, on your own, at your own pace, at your own risk, and all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying this is what works for me. Alright, hope it's helpful to somebody. Thank you.